Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, I'm running Bobby Kendall of the Whitetail Group through a series of very specific deer hunting scenarios to see exactly how he'd handle them. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and today we are kicking off our What Would You Do series, which is something we've done every August for the last 3 or 4 years now, I believe. And here's the basic gist of it. We put a great deer hunter through a gauntlet of very specific hunting challenges and scenarios. I will paint a picture of some kind of set of circumstances and then ask this hunter how they would think about it, what they would do, and why they would do it. That is what we're going to do today and for the rest of this month. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest coming up here in just a moment, but before we do that, before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, I got to give you a couple quick updates. Number one, we have another Working for Wildlife Tour event coming up here in August. So that is going to be August 12th in Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. We've got an event in collaboration with backcountry hunters and anglers. We're going to get out there on some public land near the Mississippi River, I believe, and do some habitat improvement for wildlife. So, man, if you do any public land hunting, if you do any hiking, fishing, anything like that out on these places, you know that it's important to help steward these landscapes, protect these landscapes, make sure that they are healthy and thriving ecosystems so that the critters that we want to hunt are there and in healthy populations. And that's what we're trying to do on this tour, is get out there and give back to these places that, they give us so much. So I'm really excited to get there on August 12th, meet a bunch of you, hopefully. I know we have a lot of listeners in Missouri, Kansas, that whole region. So would love to meet some of you, share some stories, take some pictures, sign books, whatever it is, and get out there doing some good work. So August 12th, you can learn more about this specific event on the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers event webpage. You'll find this event listed there in their event section, and you can register at that link. Then there's going to be a social storytelling event thing that goes on afterwards. So looking forward to that. Want to make sure everyone knew that that's coming up. Also, we've got a sale going on with First Light and all of our brands. If you happen to be listening to this on the day that it comes out, just that day, August 3rd, if you are listening on August 3rd, 2023, our season opener sale is still running. So this is everything on the Meat Eater store, First Light, Phelps, FHF, all of it up to 40% off. There's some great swag, including the Whitetail rope hat that I've worn a bunch over the last year. I've gotten lots and lots and lots of questions about when that hat's going to be going on sale. Well, it is now available finally, and it's on sale. I think 10% off is what I think I saw. Regardless, head on over to the Meat Eater store or the First Light website or any one of the brand websites. You will see all the details about what's on sale. Lots of great options, including the brand new Source vest or Origin pant from First Light. I haven't talked about the Origin pant yet, but it is like a super, almost feels like a incredibly comfortable jogger or sweat pant, but it is built with hunting in mind. It uses that same fabric from the Origin hoodie, which I know a lot of us use and love, but it's designed as like a transitional piece to wear when you're heading out to the stand, or even if it's a piece that you're using, when going from deer camp to the property or whatever it is. It's a very versatile piece. I end up wearing it all the time, just at camp, scouting, hiking around in between hunts. So check that out and everything else at firstlight.com or the Meat Eater store. And that is my last plug, other than the fact that we got to talk about our guest. And our guest today is Bobby Kendall. Bobby was on the show earlier this year for the first time this spring during our Habitat Month. He's one of the founders of the Whitetail Group, which is a company that is doing a whole bunch of different things, but they're most known, I think, for their recreational properties that they are developing and showcasing and selling for the elite whitetail hunter. They're designing properties for the elite hunting experience, is what they say. And after watching many, many, many hours of their YouTube videos in which they break down how they would hunt properties, how they would design properties, how they would manipulate and change them, I've gotten to know Bobby's approach to hunting pretty darn well, and I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of his detail-oriented approach. I'm a fan of the way he stacks odds and weighs probabilities and tries to make really smart, thoughtful decisions. It's very much in line with how I try to approach deer hunting, and Bobby probably just does it better. So that's why I wanted to have him on the show today, to really break that side of things down more, because last time we mostly talked about habitat. This time I want to talk primarily about hunting. And as I mentioned at the top, this is our What Would You Do series. So what I'm going to do here with Bobby is present him a specific scenario, a couple habitat related, and then the rest hunting. And then we're going to have Bobby break down what he would do, how he would do it, why he would do it, the things he's thinking about, everything, so that we can get a very clear look inside of the brain of a tremendously successful whitetail hunter. Bobby gets done year in and year out, and he does it in a way that I think a lot of folks can learn from. So that is our game plan for today. I'm excited for it. I hope you are too. Let's get to it. All right, so with me on the show today, we've got Bobby Kendall. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I'm glad to get you back today to talk deer hunting, not just deer management, not just deer land, but really dig into the hunting side of things, which I know you love the property aspect. And we had a great conversation this spring on that topic, but it's almost August when we're talking. And I don't know about you, but like the itch is very, very strong right now to get out there and get hunting.
Itch is real.
Yes. So what I've got for you today is this thing we call the What Would You Do gauntlet. So basically what that means is I'm going to give you a bunch of tough, specific, hypothetical situations, mostly hunting. We'll do a couple habitat things to kick things off. And basically what I need you to do is walk me through how you would handle that situation and what you're thinking. You can paint, an imaginary picture if you want. If I don't give you enough details, you can add your own details to help you make your answer make sense. And we'll kind of see how you do things. So is that something you're up for?
Yes, it is. That sounds good.
All right. Well, then we're just going to get right into it in the interest of time here, because the first one I've got here is related to habitat, like I mentioned. In this scenario, I want you to imagine a situation where you have gotten access to pretty sweet property, but it's a lease. And let's say this is the only place you can hunt this year. It is going to be a situation where you have access as a lease, and they're going to give you a 5-year term on it. So you've got some time with it. You've got time to figure it out. It's something you want to invest in a little bit. The situation, though, is that you are not allowed to make major habitat changes. You can't do major plantings. You can't do major cuttings. We're talking light touch kind of stuff here.
Yep.
In that situation, with those stipulations, what would be the two most important things that you could do to improve your hunting experience out there in this 5-year term?
Okay. Now, is this place in the Midwest, or like a typical farm with ag and stuff? Yep.
We'll say this is there in Illinois.
So, in the real world, my last couple of seasons, I have spent on a permission piece that it was exactly the situation I couldn't do. So, you kind of go back to the basics, right? And that's even when you can do a bunch of habitat manipulation, it really, you have to go back to the basics. Really good strategy with nothing done is better than all kinds of things done with no strategy. So, I guess also in this situation, have I run cameras yet? Do I know if there's a big deer there, or am I completely at the beginning stages of it?
Let's stay at this point. You are in the beginning. You can do all those things, but this is like your first season out there. You've picked it up maybe in the summer. So you've got some summer scouting under your belt, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put cameras out. Hopefully the farm is in beans so I can really get the cameras out and start seeing things. If it's in corn, that can be tough when it's not under your control, because a lot of the edges get grown up and it's really hard to put cameras out. In that situation, I'll wait until scrapes are popping up, and I'll walk the perimeter with a backpack of cameras and a hedge trimmer, battery hedge trimmer, and I'll find the scrapes, and I'll put a camera on every scrape on the edge, and I'll clear it with a hedge trimmer. Is usually what I do, because it's just kind of you're butting heads with nature if you're trying to run cameras earlier than that. A lot of times in corn, unless you got some pinches and stuff. As far as the habitat go, like one of the first things I'm gonna do is ask the landowner if can I plant any food plots, and would you mind if I talk to the farmer, if you're not out any money or it doesn't affect you, would you mind if I talk to your farm tenant and to try and find out if I can buy back some crops? Because even on my own farms, I try and work with the farmer as much as possible, because it's just so much easier. They do a better job. So once they do that, I'm going to reach out to the farmer, because I'm going to want standing crops on the farm. And my strategy with that is, I'll be like, I'll pay you whatever it is to make you whole. And if it's corn, I'll always offer to go in there after the season and mow that corn down, because that's the one thing they don't want to deal with. And that'll usually get you in the door, and maybe even offer a little bit more than what they would have got from the crop. So that I want to get my standing crops. I want to find out what deer are there right off the bat. If there is nowhere to plant a food plot, I'll also ask the farmer, hey, do you mind if I overseed some green into that area that you're letting me keep? And again, I will, by letting him know you are somewhat competent, it goes a long way. If I say, hey, can I overseed some winter rye in here? I know it's going to come up in the spring. I will come back in the spring and I'll spray it for you. Usually, if you're acting that competent, they'll let you. And then, or I'll ask if I can overseed some brassicas, because the brassicas really won't come back and make too much of a mess on them. And a lot of times, I'd say more often than not, you'll get something done with the farmer like that. So at that point, that addresses, trying to figure out what deer are there, and then getting some food going.
So let's shift to a slightly different situation then. If you were in a situation where you did just buy a farm, so rather than being on a lease that you don't have a lot of control over, now you do have full control. You just landed a dream farm. The problem is you couldn't close until late August. So you're not able to actually set foot on this farm and do anything till, let's say, August 25th, maybe. Opening day in this state, let's say you're in Iowa, opening day is October 1st. So you're maybe 5 weeks out from opening day.
Yep.
In that situation, do you try to rush to make some kind of last minute changes, plant some food plots, push in some, push in a creek crossing, do any cuttings, anything like that? Or is it too late, and at this point you just want to play it very, very light touch, just hunt it and wait till the next season to do any kind of real work?
So a lot of times, backing up from that, I've negotiated in the front side the right for early access to prep and stuff. So sometimes I will be at that point, but I'll have a little bit more time. But if I don't, I'll still go to the farmers, because that'll work. That whole conversation will work right up until they harvest. So I'd still do that, and both situations, as far as like habitat work and stuff, like I wouldn't worry about that all, because I just hunt the farm in a way I wasn't putting pressure on it, because that's the number one thing. Nothing works none of the habitat stuff works without a strategy as far as your presence and pressure. So, yeah, I don't think I'd be going in and doing creek crossings and that type of thing. But I'd be getting my cameras out, figuring what's out there. I'd be trying to figure out the farmers what they would let me, what I could do with them. And it just depends, if you're going in that late and you got some cattle pasture or something that was prepped and it was mowed down, down pretty good, you could spray it, no-till it, or, spray it and work it up in a week or two, a couple of weeks. And so it would kind of depend on the situation, I guess. But, I would, I think the big things would be working with the farmer to try and get some last minute crops and finding out what's there quick, because a lot's
Yeah.
changing that time of year.
Yep. But nothing major. You wouldn't be bringing in the dozers. You wouldn't be trying to change the world overnight.
Well, you know, in my situation, because I have like a business that has all that, and I could go in and hit it hard, like I may do that because, you know, I do not think that heavy equipment affects deer like you would think it is. Like I would think going in there and tiptoeing around and scouting and stuff would have more impact than bringing a bulldozer there and clearing a 1 acre food plot. The only reason I say that is because I've seen it 100 times when I leave a camera out and I've got guys walking back and forth with chainsaws and skidders going by all day, and then boom, here comes a 5+ year old deer in daylight by the same camera. It's like it's the craziest thing, and I've seen that over and over and over again.
They really get used to that farm equipment kind of pressure. Don't seem to be nearly as concerned with that.
Yeah. So I guess maybe the root of your question is, do you think it would affect the deer that you're going to hunt? And I do not think that it would, especially if it's a big mature deer, because a big mature deer has spent his whole life there, and it's harder than people think to run a deer like that out of their core.
Right. They're there for a reason.
Good example. Here's a great example. I got a farm this year that I'm hunting permission with a friend of mine that bought it. And he was like, go over there, see what you think needs done or whatever. And there's one spot that I feel like would greatly bring him to bow range. And I said, I'll go up there with a skid steer and I'll push out a plot, and I might even plant it the same day I'm in there with a skid steer. So yeah, I would do that type of thing. I don't think it would hurt your hunting, is what I'm saying.
Is there a cutoff date? Would there be any date that'd be too late to do something like that? Like if I change the date to September 15th or something like that,
no. I probably wouldn't want to do it anymore once we got like within maybe a week or 5 days of the season. And it depends. If it's a 1 day, go in there, heavy hit it and do it all in a day, or if it's a week-long drawn out thing, that'd be two different things. But what I wouldn't want to do is do it so close to the season that I might push him to the neighbor for a few days and then have them kill him.
Yep, I follow. Okay, one last habitat question here.
Yeah.
And this one, I'm going to send you to New York. So right where you are right now, right? Upstate New York, I think. Let's say you've got, this is a food plot question. And we're going to imagine two different versions of this food plot question. One of them will be a situation in which you do own the land and you can make big changes. One of these is a situation where you do not own the land and you can't make major changes. So the scenario is this. You've got access to this big property, relatively big. We'll say, let me take back the word big. We're going to say it's a 120-acre farm. Some people consider that big. Some people do not consider that big. It is mostly timber, swamp, timber mix kind of situation, of which there's one opening on the side of it. So you've got an 8-acre rectangular field that is surrounded by the rest of this swampy timber. Okay. That 8-acre field, like I mentioned, is planted in some, agricultural food source. The situation is this. There is a big giant buck that you have noticed that's coming in and out of this big chunk of timber. Let's say you know that from history. The problem here, though, is that because of how large this food source is and because of the kind of terrain features and whatnot, there's no real rhyme or reason, at least not a consistent rhyme or reason to how this buck is entering or exiting this field. What would you do to try to make a large food source hunt setup like that work better given this scenario? Option A is, first, let's talk about you can't replant it. You can't change the shape of it. You can't cut a bunch of trees down around it. So you have to kind of do some light touch things on this. And then option B would be the full Whitetail Group, arsenal is at your disposal to redesign this setup. So there's your situation.
How big is the field?
That's 8 acres.
8 acres.
Rectangle.
And what's planted in it? Corn,
let's Yeah, let's say it's beans, because I want something that's like not providing a lot of cover. I want an big open field. So we're say it's beans right now, as it stands right now. So in the situation where you don't own it, some farmer planted those beans. In the situation where you do own it, you can change it to whatever you want.
Yep. So first thing I look at is access and dominant winds, and I would just really quickly be like, I want to be in this area of the field, right? And then I'd go to that area and I'd try and find the huntable tree. And then I would, am I allowed to overseed? Do I got to talk to the farmer again?
You can talk to the farmer.
Yeah. So I would be like, hey man, would you mind if I overseeded some brassicas in here? They won't, I mean, most of them understand cover cropping. They understand it's a good thing. So let's say he lets me do that. And we do this. Well, that's the next question with the developed farms, but I'm going to set my stand and then I'm going to overseed within bow range in green of rye and turnips. Keep it super simple. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to cut every scrape branch off of that tree except for the ones that are in bow range. So I'm going to just do everything I can possibly do to make that deer, come there to me. Depending on how wide the field is, if it's rectangle, I mean, back in the day, I remember literally taking deadfalls with my golf cart and like leaning over so I don't touch the ground. And I'm not this crazy anymore because I don't think that you need to be, and like literally like hooking onto a deadfall and skidding it out in the plot and laying this like dead stick out there, 10, 20 feet, just something that they'll walk around. So like it can be that primitive because you can manipulate like super primitively or easily. But those two things there are going to, if you up your odds, you're going to up your odds that a doe is going to be in front of you because of the green, which ups your odds that a buck's going to be there. And if you eliminate scrape branches, you're going to up your odds that if it's October and he's going to go to a scrape, that he's obviously going to go to you. And at the same time, you're going to make that scrape more powerful because it's going to get more scent and it's just going to snowball.
Yeah. Now, real quick, clarifying question. You talked about the overseeding thing quite a lot. Can you just give a little bit more detail on when you want to do that with beans versus when you'd want to do that with corn?
Yeah. So beans you want to do when the leaves are yellowing. As soon as they start to yellow, you want to get that seed onto the ground before the leaves drop so that a bunch of the seed doesn't lay on top of the leaves. Some of them will be covered, but I'll usually double the rate. If you want to really do it right, I'd put 2 bags of rye per acre and probably, 8 or 10 pounds of turnips, pretty heavy. And sometimes I'll literally just, whatever I got left over from food plot season, oats and rye and turnips and radish and rape, and I'll just put it all out there because some of it doesn't have as good a seed to soil, but you've got the leftover seed and some of it's going to grow. So the heavier you put it on, the better. You got to account that some of them aren't going to germinate because of the leaves falling on them and stuff. But it's awesome. If you've never done it, I mean, you get a carpet of green. Again, probability and stuff. All of deer hunting to me is like probability and math.
Yep.
In order to get an acre of green and an acre of beans, you end up with 2 acres, which says it's just harder to hunt because it's bigger. But when you put it in the same spot, your chances are 50% better. Technically, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but
sure. What about the corn situation? When would you put it on the corn?
So the corn is kind of the same deal. You want it to be browning down. Corn works really well. Like if you're planting it yourself, if you're going to overseed or at least overseed an area, if you can run those corn rows north and south, the sun will get in them better and you'll get better germination. So, and with the corn, you use a leaf blower spreader.
Makes sense.
It's kind of a pain, but it's worth it. And, the other thing about corn, and this is kind of getting away from that situation, but a lot of times I'll go in and mow my first quarter acre area like September 25th. And then that puts corn on the ground in front for opening week. But it also is early enough that same day I'll overseed it. And then I'll get the carpeted green and the corn there. And that's like the hub. And then I'll just start mowing as the season. I'll mow a little more. And a big tip on that corn is after I get done mowing it, let's say for the first time in the 1/4 acre, I'll drive through the corn. I'll lift my mower up. I don't want to sling corn anymore. I'll drive out of the corn in a couple of directions where I think he's going to come from. But I'll make that road when it comes into the corn. Like, I won't make it come straight at me, because then when he walks in the field and puts his head down and he's eating, he's going to be looking straight down, or he's going to be not broadside. So even if I got to have it come in and then loop a little bit or something and come in from the side or jay it at the last second, I'll shape it to where when he walks in, he's in bow range, or he's broadside, and not mow it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Let's shift more into hunting stuff here. From this situation, let's imagine we're approaching the time frame now where you've got, let's say we're September, and all your work is done across all your properties, leading in hunting season. You're set, your plots are planted, your box blinds are up, your tree stands are hung, cameras are set wherever you want them. You're just kind of monitoring and waiting for opening day. Then all of a sudden, a new mega giant shows up. It would be your biggest buck ever. It'll be 220 inches in your, eyeball estimation. You're very excited to see this buck pop up. He's popped up on a smaller one of your properties, and you have no history with him. Random buck, but he's like showing up. It's not like a one-time thing. He's kind of popping up here and there. You've got a little time leading to the season now, and all of a sudden you're realizing, holy smokes, this is the deer that I want. What do you do in that type of situation to go from 0 to 60 and trying to put together a plan and kind of tighten the noose on this deer that is brand new, very exciting? How are you going to learn in this situation quickly?
I'm going to go over there with a lot of cell cams, and I'm going to load that place up. I'm going to take one day. I'm going to go over there in my tractor, preferably, if not tractor, Ranger. I'm going to bomb around everywhere, because if I'm going to anticipate that I'm going to run them out of there, but that's okay. The way I'm going to run them out of there is a lot better than just like slipping around everywhere. And if I got to slip around, it's fine. Sometimes I'll even get on the phone or something. So I'm like, just obnoxiously not a threatening something sneaking up on them, which is what they're wired to defend against. I'm going to load it up with cameras. I'm going to put cameras in places that I anticipate that. If it's September, I'm going to obviously be trying to put a camera on every single scrape. If it is kind of backing up, this might not be this situation, but whenever, obviously the best scouting time is in the winter before green up. Whenever I'm on a farm that time of year and I find scrapes, I'm pinning them. It's like, I call it like a scrape mat. I mean, it does not make sense that time of year. You might not even know the deer. You might not have history on it. But the following year, having those can be a complete game changer and all of a sudden make total sense. So if I know where any of those scrapes are going to pop up, I'm going to put cameras out there. If there's spots that I wouldn't put a camera necessarily in September, but I would, in October or a little later, I might put one there. I'm just going to try and do everything I can think that I might have to do in one day, in one shot. I'm going to bring, some stands, I'm going to hang them in some obvious spots. And I'm just going to try and hit it hard one day and then wait and see what happens.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, okay. You've laid out the groundwork for this situation then, and let's kind of continue down this imaginary path. Let's say you did this day of scouting, this heavy duty day of laying everything out there, getting all your cameras, getting your stands out, all that kind of stuff. Now I want to talk about picking your shots. And I'll preface this situation by saying I've got a Magic X question for you. So before answering the question, give folks a reminder of what your Magic X theory is, and then walk me through how you would apply that. So let's imagine this scenario. Let's imagine that you have a different job than you have now. And so you are in a 9 to 5 kind of career. So you don't have a lot of time to get flexible with. And so in this situation, you usually just have a week of vacation to really use for your hardcore hunt. And that's usually a rut hunt. It's usually going to be that first week of November, let's say. So that's when you took your week of vacation. So you've got this mega giant you're after. You've got a week of vacation scheduled to get after him. You're getting closer to that time period. You're monitoring all these different things, the weather, your cameras, whatnot. You see in the long-term forecast that your scheduled week is looking like it's going to be pretty warm. It's not looking ideal. But at the same time, right now in late October, let's say like October, 20s, low 20s, you've got a Magic X day coming up. So in this situation, do you cancel your vacation and scramble things at work to move your vacation up a week and a half so you can hunt the Magic X in late October? Or do you know that, the rut's the rut and I got to make it happen here, with my planned vacation? What's more important, the rut in November or that Magic X day that's coming up in those early 20s?
There's so much to talk about here. So there's two paths to answer that question.
Okay.
If it's a guy who is just going hunting, like he's not he's not running camera, he's not doing food plot, he doesn't have target deer, he's just going and hunting. If it's that guy, you want to be going probably in the rut, because all that stuff kind of goes out the window. When I say rut, that's another term that starts in September, and that's what the whole quarter of the year is. So, but that time of the rut where you're most likely to see a deer, it's just that it's the most predictable. It's the most unpredictable. It's the easiest to just go out and pick a spot and sit there and possibly shoot a nice deer.
Yeah.
If you are in tune with it and you're paying and you're following a deer and you're got cameras out and you know what a deer is doing, hands down, there's not even a comparison that you would be better off in October. And if I haven't got my target deer killed by, November 1st or 2nd, I got to get mentally strong, because it's just so frustrating in the rut. I've killed a lot of big deer in that first 10 days, but it just gets more frustrating. So yeah, in October, so Magic X Day. So I use the Weather Underground. I'll show you here real quick, maybe on the phone, so people can understand it a little bit better. But I use the Weather Underground, not the app, but I use the website on the phone, and then I anchor it to my home page. And I'm trying to pull it up here, but it just shows a really big display. And any app that shows the pressure line will work, but it just shows it really, really nice and big and clear. But essentially what the Magic X is, and it's more pronounced that time of year than it is in the summer, but when you have a high pressure front come in, you'll see the black line on that app particularly, but that's the high pressure, and it'll look like that.
Yep.
And then at the same time, you have temperatures dropping, so the temperature line is dropping, humidity is usually dropping, cloud cover is dropping. So it literally kind of makes an X on the graph, and you can see it instantly. And those days in October, they trump everything. I mean, if you have a big deer on camera, and it's not just late October, it becomes more powerful in late October, but whenever it happens is really good. Like I think 2 years ago, it was a really good stretch, like October 16th to the 19th. And then within the last couple of years, there was a really good stretch, like the 6th through the 10th or something like that. It doesn't really matter. But, there's all these different things that affect deer movement. And when you line them all up, like their mindset in the end of October, they're just so much more rambunctious and rammy. So if you get a Magic X Day in the end of October, yeah, it's better. But I would take a Magic X Day, high pressure front, in the beginning of October. I'd be more excited to go to the woods on that day than I would on a mediocre day in the end of October. So those high pressure fronts are key in October. If you are watching a deer and you know what he's doing, I mean, it is so. I mean, it feels like it's the code. You know what I mean? Like unpressured deer doing what deer should do. He's going to be out marking territory and hitting scrapes in October on those nights. You know, so.
What about another weather scenario in which we get the opposite situation? Let's say it's opening day. So I don't know how you feel, but I feel really great on opening day. I'm very excited. The deer have been unpressured. I always feel like that's a really exceptional opportunity. I like to take big swings on opening day if it's smart to do so. But let's say opening day coincides with the opposite of a Magic X day. Let's say it's going to be like 76 and a low barometer and southeast winds and a dark moon. In that situation, are you still going to take a big swing at your target buck on opening day because it's opening day? Or are you playing it very differently? What would you do?
No, I'm probably going to go hunt because it's opening day, but I'm definitely not going to do anything too aggressive. I'm probably not going to bomb in where he's been at night, you know. I just, you know, I used to hunt every single day, no matter what. And now I'm just, those days are so powerful that it's just not worth you're going to do more harm than good most of the time. You know, by bombing in there too early on the days that aren't good, you know.
Do you hunt even in his area, or do you completely leave that property alone, hunt somewhere else, and just try to kill a doe or something?
If I was going to hunt in his area, I'd probably hunt somewhere where I could see a long way and just maybe see if I could see him. But, you know, it depends. There in Illinois, and this changes everywhere you're at, but there can be like it seems like, and this is kind of like a gut feeling, it does seem like in Illinois, there can be like a 1, 2, 3 day window in the October 1st where they can still move on warmer days because they're more in that summer mindset. Mm-hmm. But it changes very quickly, you know. But I'd say by the 4th or 5th or 6th, it's that game's kind of over. So, yeah, you know, if my cameras are still telling me the day before and the 2 days before that he's out there in daylight and on warm days, you know, I'm gonna go in there and get after him, you know. And that's a point I like to make. Like, I had a friend last year who had this giant deer, and he's like, I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, he's coming out here and he's crossing the road and everybody's seeing him. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm not going to go in there until November. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I just don't want to pressure him. I'm like, dude, here is a tip. When you have a big deer and he is wanting to die, you have got to go hunt him because he is not going to be there. When they're giving you the opportunity, you better seize it. You know, you can get aggressive with a big old deer and not run them out like you think, but you know, you got to get after it because before you know it, you're going to be like, he's gone.
Yeah. Okay. So continue with that. What if you have that situation where you've got a buck daylighting? Maybe you get him on camera 2 days out of 3, leading up to a day you can hunt. Mm-hmm. But the situation is like we're talking about, where it's hot. The conditions seem lousy, but he showed up a couple times before. And let's say like the wind is not bulletproof. It's kind of one of those days. It's like, well, you know, I could do it maybe, but it's a little bit risky. You know, I've been in a situation like this where like, man, he's been daylight. He might not ever do it again, or this might be my one chance. And do you take the swing? Would you take a swing on that kind of situation despite the iffy conditions because that daylight photo is so rare and you got to take advantage of those moments?
You know, if I'm from out of town and I'm there, I probably would. But if I live there or live nearby, like I do tend to hunt very conservatively. I call it like hunting defensively instead of offensively. A lot of people are like looking for the magic thing to do, and usually it's things they need just to not do. You know what I mean? Less is so much more. And I got this kind of big macro approach to the whole hunting season, and it's a tortoise and the hare game. I treat my farm like a glass house. Because once you once you do ruin it, you've ruined it, So I don't get too rammy. I guess if that answers your question, you know, I don't know. I just try and treat it like a glass house and not make mistakes. It's very methodical and it's slow, and just the mental side of hunting is like most of the time. And you kind of, as you mature as a hunter, you are able to just relax and be okay with it. But I remember, man, just getting so wound up, and most of the time that's the way you're going to feel, because it's not usually like when you finally got it, like, I'm going to kill this deer, usually it's over within a day or two. You know what I mean? So a lot of times it should feel kind of like, what is going on? Where is he? He's gone, this or that. And it's just kind of like, you just got to trust the process and the season and all your philosophies, because there's just light switch moments throughout the season. Every year they happen. And when you're in one of the lows, I'm just like, something will happen here in a minute. Like last year, I mean, I shot a huge deer last year. I had pictures of him in the summer. I thought he was like a lot smaller than he ended up being. They weren't good pictures. There was some other people hunting the farm. I had some equipment go missing. I was like, whatever, screw this. I left a camera by accident on the piece next door, and I didn't even have any cameras over there. And all of a sudden I got a picture of him, like, and I wasn't even hunting really in October because I didn't really have anything I'd shoot. And all of a sudden, like November 4th, I get a picture of him right in the camera. I'm like, wow, I misjudged him by a lot. And like, and then boom, 2 days later, I shoot a mega giant, and it's like, it's just that's the way deer season goes. And I think everybody can relate to that. It's never you're on a high the whole time. You're just going from big deer to big deer to big deer. It's usually like,
a lot of lows, a lot of question marks, and then a couple high points.
Yeah.
So you kind of alluded to an answer to this next question I have, but I'm curious about like a little bit about how you're utilizing your cell cameras. And these days, I think there's a temptation to kind of chase cell pics. I think a lot of people are kind of chasing pictures. So let's imagine this is like, mid-October-ish kind of time period. And you've got this methodical, macro strategy like you just talked about for hunting. So let's say later October, because things are a little more exciting then. And so you have a plan in place. Like, you've been hunting all October. You've been hunting smart. You're going into the evening hunt, and you're sitting in a spot that you think's dynamite. You've got a solid reason to be hunting in this area because of history, because of the wind, because of the terrain setup, because of your plot setup, whatever it is. But just before you head down the road, you get your upload from yesterday's cell cameras, let's say, and you all of a sudden see a daylight picture of your target buck or a target buck. Some are completely different. Conditions aren't bad there. But he was there yesterday. Do you chase that cell cam pic because he was there daylight yesterday evening? Or do you stick to your original plan that you spent all day thinking through and you feel really confident about despite this picture?
How far are you talking?
How far are these two properties separated? Or these two places? Yeah. Let's say they are different deer. Like, these are different. No, let's not say they're different deer. Let's say this is within the same property. So hypothetically, you could see this same buck in either spot, but let's say this is like 300 acres maybe. And they're not right next to each other, somewhere in that 300 acres, but not super duper close.
Yeah. Well, it would depend on when that picture was. If it was like, because I look at that picture and try and figure out where he was bedded when I got that. Like, if it was earlier the evening, the day before. So it meant I try and figure out, like, okay, where was he coming from or going to in this picture, or was it a random picture at the end at the middle of the night? Because, I mean, they can cover some ground. And if it's October, they're fairly patternable, in my opinion, except for when you get into, like, I call it the boomerang phase, like October 27th, 28th, 29th. It's like what happens in that date is like it seems like when a bunch of deer within that older age class separate in September, seems like you'll get one whose core is here and one whose core is here and one whose core is here. And they might overlap a little bit in October, but they're really territorial, and that's what they're doing. They're in a territory marking mindset. And so all of a sudden in that, what I call the boomerang phase, you'll see this deer, boom, loop up here, and you'll see this deer loop down here, and you'll see this deer loop up here. And if you pay attention, it's like it's every year on the 27th they'll get a picture, and I'll text it to Toby and be like, boomerang phase. So it just kind of depends on some things, but I try and stick to the plan because they can cover a ton of ground in 10 minutes. And if he's been doing something in October, he's probably you're higher odds that he's going to keep doing that than all of a sudden change. And so, a lot of these questions, it might help if I kind of gave my overall picture of deer season, because I kind of have it fairly simplified. That might help lock some of this stuff together.
Yeah, let's do it.
So my approach is there's 3 things that affect big deer to move. And there's more things than that, but they all kind of group into these things. One is date or phase, and I also call that mindset, because that's all that really is. The deer their mindset is wired the same every year to the date because of the photo period or whatever. So the date, phase, or mindset, that's a predictable thing. So like I can use my philosophies and stuff and say, okay, it's October 27th. This is the mindset of these deer. They're going to be rammier in their territory marking. So I can use that to make wise decisions. So date, phase, or mindset. And that goes back to your thing about the cameras. October is different because they're pretty much in the same mindset the whole month. It's a ramp up, but it's a territory marking mindset.
Yep.
You'll see them mess with does, but it's really more of a territory. Like they'll come out, people will be like, oh, they're chasing does. But really what he did was he came out, he curled his lips, he pushed her, and he's showing dominance. It's still that mindset. And then like a light switch on Halloween, it changes to a doe. So it's a territory cruising mindset where on a high pressure Magic X day in the end of October, he's cruising, going scrape to scrape to scrape, sometimes every food plot on the whole farm. And then like a light switch, it becomes a doe mindset. Now he's cruising, trying to find a doe. So that's like a light switch event that happens. And now all of a sudden he's using his nose to navigate because he has to. So then your strategy, a lot of things change then. So there's date, phase, or mindset. And I always try and be in front of the deer. Especially once October 31st rolls around, the cameras somewhat go out the window. I mean, they definitely still give you information, but I'm trying to be ahead of that deer. That big deer I shot last year was like November 5th or something. I went to a tree stand, I left in case that deer blew up, which he did, and I shot him my first time in because I knew he was in there that date the year before, and I knew what he was doing. So I was ahead of him. I wasn't really worrying that I got his picture on the neighboring piece. I was hunting, out in front of the deer, predicting his next move. So date, phase, or mindset. That's one thing that I look at. The other thing is moon. Get everybody fired up about the moon. I am a huge moon believer. The week leading up to the full moon is more powerful for evening sits. The week after is more powerful for morning sits. I understand that there's all kinds of studies. But I can feel the difference. And I've run so many cameras. I've been in the woods so many years and so many dates and so many of those moon phases, and I can just feel the difference. It gives you a little bit of an edge. And when you couple it with a high pressure front in the end of October, so, and the third thing, so you got moon phase, which is predictable. You got date, phase, or mindset, which is predictable. And the last thing is the environment, which is not predictable. And that goes to the Magic X day. If you keep it as simple as a Magic X day, that X represents cold weather. It represents, high pressure. They accompany each other. So whatever people think is the most powerful part of that day that starts out gloomy, damp, dreary, humid, and by prime time is bluebird, 15 degrees cooler, a lot drier air. That is the best day in the world to deer hunt. I mean, it's just fire. It's just, I literally go to my tree stand like this on that day. And so when you get all three of those things to line up, you have a crazy powerful day. If you don't have a good moon phase, but you have a good environment and it's not a good day, it's early October, it's still good because of the environmental. It just, when you take all three of those things and you line them up together, those are the best days in the woods. So those three concepts, the date, the phase, or which equals mindset, the moon phase, and the environmental, that's kind of like the premises of everything. So, you know, but back to that original question about, you know, what was the question again?
Heck, I don't even remember now.
It was something about like your trail cams, you know.
Oh yeah. It was, you know, if you got a cell picture of a shooter buck in daylight the evening before in a different place than your planned location, as you're about to go to that planned location, would you stick with the plan or chase that daylight photo that happened yesterday?
Yeah. So if it's October, I'm going to go to where he's been on camera, even if it's at night, working scrapes, because I know his mindset is marking territory. So I'm going to stick to that plan. I'm not going to get rammy and bounce around. He shouldn't be crazy far away in October anyway. Mm-hmm. If it's in the date that, again, being ahead of him, predicting him, date, phase, or mindset, if it's end of October and you're in that you know, boomerang-ish type phase, I could see him being on the other side of the farm. But a lot of times that is a march that night, and he's right back. So I would kind of use my philosophies and stay calm and just be like, I'm going to go in there. If he comes, he comes. If not, he lives another day. But sooner or later, he's, you know, gonna get a crack at him.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I don't ever get too rammy to get, like, I literally say this is a whole season. I just got to make base hit plays. In other words, not do something stupid, which is inevitable. You know, do stupid things a lot, but so that's just part of it.
What does it take to get you rammy? Is it all three of those factors lining up? Is that the only situation where you're like, okay, I gotta get really aggressive because Magic X, time of year, and the cold front,
yeah, I mean,
and the moon? Yeah.
So if it's as October goes, I'll get more aggressive because he's on that pattern, you know. Mm-hmm. In the end of the month, like if I get all three of those things, like this year we got a full moon in the end of October. So, and I'll look at the exact dates, and if I'm somebody who's like trying to plan when I'm coming in October, I'm going to plan the week before the full moon, because in that week period, you're going to have one high pressure sit, and it's going to be one of the most powerful nights of the whole season to shoot a target deer that you're on. Mm-hmm. This year, it falls on the 28th. So the week of like the 23rd to the 27th, I mean, if you've got a big deer on camera in October doing something at night, and that's another whole rabbit hole, is like people say, oh, I got this deer, but he's nocturnal. Well, he's nocturnal because that's what they do. They're wired to do that. But then randomly you get a daylight picture, and it's because, you know, there's a rhyme or reason usually to it. And so all those things I'm seeing him do at night, I'm not going to get discouraged that he's doing it at night. I'm just going to pay attention to where he's entering the field at night, because that's probably where he's going to enter it in the daylight, which scrapes he's hitting, you know, all those things, you know, possibly wind directions. Maybe you find that he's entering the field in a different spot, a different wind direction or something like that, which might be because he's bedding in a different spot on a different wind direction, which I've seen some crazy things happen with all these walls and stuff we build when we're building projects and farms. Mm-hmm. I've had situations where my cameras tell me 100%, like when he goes bed to feed, he has to go by my camera because he can't not. And I had this giant deer in Marshall County. There was this bluff and a cornfield. And in the summer, I had a couple of these random, like some days he'd be bedded in the bottom in the corn, and some days he'd bedded on the hilltop. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then there was a few days, like in the middle of the day in the summer, like 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I get a picture of him randomly walking through the gap. And then one day I had him go through, and then a few hours later went back through again. And I went back to Weather Underground history, and every single one of those was on a wind change. Those midday moves, it was on a wind change. Like to the hour, he got up and left one bedding area and went to the other one based off the wind. And the day he moved twice, there was 2 wind changes. And, you don't get that kind of intel unless you literally unless you get 100%, camera intel. So, some of that's been interesting to see when your camera locations go up crazy. But yeah, that week this year of the 23rd to the 27th is when I'd be planning my hunt out west. Back to the original question. If I'm going somewhere and I only got a week to plan or whatever, I'm going to plan it around the week leading to the full moon in October. And the reason it's the week leading to the full moon is because that's the best evening, and October is conducive to evening hunting, mostly. So that's what I'm going to pick, and I'm going to look for that Magic X Day. And I mean, try it if you're listening this year. Watch that week leading up to the 28th. Watch for a Magic X Day. I've got a video on my YouTube stuff that will help you get that set up and figure out exactly, what that is. And if you have a target deer and you feel like you're on a deer and whatever he's doing, go sit that night, that Magic X night in that week right there. Or if you can't hunt, watch your cameras on that day. It's really powerful. It's probably the most powerful day of the whole deer season, is the Magic X Day leading up to the full moon in the month of October.
All right. Well, I'm gone from my home base properties until the 28th. So I'm going to try to get it done that night, I guess. Yeah, if I can't be there for those days leading up to it.
And here's another thing about the day of the full moon, just something I've seen over the years. You don't see a lot of deer generally, but but I've seen, and I've got pictures of some big ones, like right at last light, like more often than coincidentally.
Interesting.
And I don't know the whole moon conversation. It's like there's this culture of like, oh, the moon, but I can feel it in me. I know for a fact it makes a difference with big mature deer that require very specific triggers to move in daylight. But when they are triggered, they're just out there walking around. I mean, it's not like they're like some type of a unicorn that the magnetic pole of the moon is forcing them. It's not really like that. It's just like, okay, they're up. But like Lee Lakosky, he is the same way. I mean, he believes in the moon. I had him tell me last year on a warm day, somebody said, oh, it's a warm day. He's like, they're like, probably not much going on. He's like, yeah, unless you have a water hole on a green source. And we're like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, what's the moon doing? He goes, I'll have a big one on camera at 2:30 today. He sends us a picture of a big one at 2:35. He's like, right on time. So you got a guy like that, and you got a guy like Ben Rising, you got Mark Drury, and all of them are like, they feel that they're in there and they can feel the mindsets of these deer, and they're all like, yes, it makes a difference. So I don't know where the disconnect is between the science and the guys that are shooting these big deer, but I don't know if it's because it's skewed because there's less percentage of mature deer that I don't know what it is,
Well, and to your point you made earlier, and I know like one of your larger kind of theories of hunting is like you're stacking all these little tiny odds. And even if the moon is only like a 2% thing, maybe that doesn't show up as statistically significant in a larger study, but a 2% bump for a specific mature buck to move on a day stacked with all these other things can be a huge difference for a hunter. So,
right. And so now working theory off of those three principles, one being the moon, on a year in the morning. So on a year that the moon is full at the end of October, like this year, I'm probably not going to do too much morning hunting leading up to that, because that's the grand finale. And it's in the end of October. So my hunting chances are just going to get higher and higher and higher. If that full moon is like the 18th or the 20th, I am going to plan on morning hunting some that week after, because that moon does give a slight edge to movement after it. And the mornings in October can be really good. But the thing is, you have the whole month to play the game of the tortoise and the hare in the glass house. So it's not worth potentially going out and ruining it here when you still got more time. But if the moon peaks out here in helping me, and now I've got this window here, I'll probably hunt some morning after the high pressure fronts on scrapes, because he's going to be doing the same thing. He's going to be marking mindset. He is going to be marking territory on that farm, because that's what he's wired to do. And now I've got two things in my favor. I've got a Magic X day, the morning after the high pressure front, and I've got that moon phase. So I have two things helping me. And mornings in the end of October can be really good. There's no denying that. It's just, you have to balance the risk reward, which is something I'm always thinking about. Is the risk worth the reward? And at that point, in my eyes, because of that moon, the risk becomes worth the reward, because now you're running out of time before his mindset changes.
Yep, I follow you. Okay, so not new scenario. Let's just move forward a week. So let's stick with what that calendar looks like this year. So full moon, October 28th. You're hunting, though, it's now November 1st. And your 7-day forecast for that period is a hot rut. So this is what a lot of us experienced last year. And I don't know where you were at from November 1 through 7, but it was hot and kind of miserable in Ohio and Nebraska, where I was at. So let's say you've got that. You've got 7 days of like 70 to 80 degree temperatures from November 1 through 7. Yeah. And this is about a week following the full moon.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation? What kind of setups? What's your plan given that?
So the first thing that you're going to notice is everybody's going to be saying the deer are locked down early this year, which is not true. It's just the perceiving that, because there's going to be a lack of deer movement, so they're going to be attributing it to lockdown, but it's really not. Lockdown is kind of that date that everything else pendulates on. So like sometimes I got friends in other areas that we're trying to figure something out. And we'll try and figure out when lockdown is. We'll be like, well, when do you see like nothing but button bucks and fawns? And then we'll try and backdate and correlate it to days I know from that. So like boomerang phase, lockdown in Illinois is like the 14th is epicenter of it. So like if I count days back to the 28th, I do the same thing for my friend somewhere else that his lockdown is the 20th, so he'd be a week. So the first thing is, it's going to be slow. No, it's going to be slow. Their mindset is going to still be the same. The light switches change, and now they're in a doe mindset. They want to find a girlfriend. So now we're going to think like a deer and what their mindset is, what they're trying to do, and we're going to try and get out ahead of them. The cameras kind of go away. They don't go away. Scrapes are, they're stopping to hit scrapes like a light switch because their mindset has changed. The biggest, and now we're in a time that some of that stuff can go out the window, because if there's a hot doe, now is the time. Now comes the grind. Now is like, here we go. This is the here we go time period.
Yes, it is.
So, the things that you have in your favor are, that is the best time of year to hunt when you have poor conditions like that. So at that time of year, I guess I would probably ignore those conditions. Now there is the mental side of this. if you are one that gets, I know guys that sit all day, every day, they're hardcore. I'm hardcore, but I can sit all day, no problem, when I know it's the right day. When it's not the right day, it's extremely hard for me to sit all day.
Those are really miserable days.
Yeah. I'm probably going to still hunt those days. I'm not going to hunt all day. I'm not going to get I'm not going to go into those stands that are hung or that I would never go into other than those few day windows. And I'm going to mentally conserve until it's right. Because I'd rather put in 5 all day sits from November 7th to the 12th than burn myself out and then only do half day sits in those days. So there's some mental battles there and stuff. I personally would not get too rammy yet. And here's, in my opinion, the biggest key to hunting that part of the rut, or, the rut as people know it, deer looking for does. That if you reverse engineer it from a deer's nose, they're using their nose to find does. A lot of people say, buck deer walk into the wind, quartered into the wind all the time. I don't think they do that. I've seen them walking with the wind in their back when their mindset is just food. They're not using their nose. If they're not highly pressured and they have to walk around, like, they can't. I mean, it's almost impossible to just walk into the wind all the time. But when that light switch changes and they're looking for a doe, they're using their nose. So I'm looking to hunt doe bedding areas on the downwind side of those doe bedding areas. And that's where some manipulation can get really good, because when you can create thickets, not the whole woodlot, but when you can go in and hinge cut, places that are engineered around access a huntable tree, and you put that little puff, quarter acre, whatever, on a south facing point in the woods or whatever, when you put it in the right spot and it's upwind and it becomes thick enough where they can't see a doe bedding it, they have to use their nose, you can create what is essentially like kill food plots, but they're bedding areas with strategy. So now you're sitting on the downwind side of a game of connect the dots. And when he gets rammy and wants to go find does, he's liable to hit every single one of those, doe bedding areas on your farm in one walk. And when he comes to one that he can't see with his eyes, he's coming to the downwind side of it. So always in the rut, always thinking like a deer in the way that they use their nose, that, and hunting food sources, obviously where does are going to be at. But, I've literally committed to try my hardest when November 1 rolls around to not get in a box blind anymore. Like, I want to be able to see and hear. They are going to spend more hours of their daylight time in cover, in the woods, navigating, looking for does, than they're going to spend out there on a food source. Not to say I won't hunt it in the evening, but you want your eye. In October, box blind is a key tool. You got light and variable winds, you got thermals. They will screw you more often. It is so important to have scent-free blinds in October if possible. November, I will literally have the tree stand hung above my blind, and I'll be in it because I want my eyes, I want my ears, I want to go feel the energy of the woods. I don't call much, but when I can feel it all of a sudden, that a light switch, we've all seen it happen. Like, something is going on today. There's bucks everywhere. Just like when I feel that is when I might, call or whatever. So, don't want to be in a box blind in the rut in that time of the year when they're looking for does. And I want to always be where does are, because that's where they're going, and I want to be on the downwind side of where those does are in the woods. Pinch points are great, especially when you can engineer one of those thickets in a pinch point with good access and a huntable tree.
Yeah. Let's expand on some of the setup discussion you've got going here with the rut. Let's say that's this time period, rut time period, first week or two of November. Let's say it's Illinois. somewhere but it's an all timber piece you're hunting. Zero ag, or at least that you can hunt. You just got a big block of timber. Let's call it like a rectangular 100. And let's say it's got rolling topography, mixed hardwoods, and a small creek that's kind of winding right down the middle. So it's pretty simple to picture, right? In that scenario, can you walk me through a hypothetical ideal rut stand setup or two, given that simple scenario, how you would try to hunt something like that?
So like a farm that I'm going to go scout and hang stuff for like that week, or something I already know the layout to it?
Well, you can do either one. Basically what I'm interested in is like, how would you hunt a property like that for someone who's got just timber?
If I already know the farm, I'm going to have an idea of where the doe bedding areas are, and I'm just going to hunt those. If they're thick, I'm going to set up on the downwind side of that cover. If I've got like, I'm not going to be low in those bottoms because the wind is going to be wonky and stuff. If I got ridge tops that intersect, they're killer, old fences in the woods. But just always thinking about the nose thing. Like, we've done a lot of consults for people where they bring us to a spot that we already are looking at on a map because it's obvious, and they got to stand there, and they're like, we just don't ever see any big deer out here. We get pictures of them, we just don't see many big ones. And we're like, it's because your stand is on the wrong side of the spot. You're hunting the spot with the wind good for you, but he's got no reason to be here because he's on the other side of all this cover. You know what I mean? So always thinking about the wind in their nose, and as a macro, like looking at the farm, like if I got this wind, what spots is he going to want to be at looking for does based off this wind? Yep. That is like powerful ruts, because I used to, as you evolve as a deer hunter, it's just like, pinch points, funnels, and that's all great because you're catching them kind of bebopping around to those spots. But that's more predictable, hunting the downwind side of things.
Yeah. Here's another one that a lot of people face during this time period. And, within the deer hunting community these days, there's a lot of buzz and trendiness around being really mobile, bounce around a lot, moving around a lot. And I would say from the outside looking in, it seems like you might be more, you've got very well planned out locations. You have a lot of preset stands, box blinds. You've manipulated terrain to have, things happening in specific places for specific reasons that you know about. So I'm going to make the assumption that you might be more of a, hey, I'm sticking it out here kind of guy. But I want to lay out the scenario and see what you would do. Let's say you're hunting during the rut. You're on, one of these properties you've hunted in the past, and you see a shooter buck cruising outside of range during the rut. You see a mature buck that you want to shoot doing something outside of range from where you are. Mm-hmm. And then you see a younger buck do the same thing later. Let's say this is the morning of a cold November day. Mm-hmm. Do you move to chase a buck sighting like that day or the next day or something? Or do you stick to whatever it is you're doing despite an observation, that's confirmed by at least two bucks doing the same thing?
Yeah. So believe it or not, a lot of the farms like we develop and stuff, a lot of them, by the time they're developed, they're sold. So it's either like a farm that I own and not much has been done, so I'm kind of hunting it old school anyway. So yeah, actually, believe it or not, more of my hunting is pretty mobile. I mean, if I have, obviously we build stuff for those magical days in October, and those are pretty obvious. I mean, because those setups we're trying to set them up around, the wind direction and the thermals, so, and that's a big thing, is setting up your setups. So especially in October, I'm always looking at the terrain and where the thermals are going to go, because they will overpower the wind in October almost every evening. I mean, So it's really important to have your wind direction lined up with the thermals. But that being said, in October, yeah, I'm trying to be in box blind because they hedge the wind, they up odds. Usually they're in those setups, but I got about 10 or a dozen Novics and I make sure they're all back in my house, hanging up on the wall when I go into the season, because more often than not, and actually I've gotten to the point, especially on like permission pieces and leases and stuff, I don't even pre-hang stuff anymore because it feels like always I'm running and gunning and moving and I'm in some crazy little 4-inch tree. And so, yeah, I actually, believe it or not, I run and gun a lot. I think partially because a lot of the fully developed stuff is already sold, or we get people the right to hunt it while they're under contract and stuff like that. So I love running and gunning. And I love all the mobile, I'm not a saddle hunter. I bought one. I haven't used it yet. I love a lot of the stuff that these guys are doing. Like I've got just utilizing a lot of the lightweight stuff and the AM steel and or whatever. This stuff is really cool. And it's all that stuff is all layers of strategy, being mobile. I think being mobile is being able to get in crooked trees. And that's so key because like I have a saying, it's better to be in the wrong tree in the right spot than the right tree in the wrong spot. And I won't sacrifice that for 10 feet. I mean, I'll get in a 4-inch tree and bring cedar branches up in there and be 8 feet off the ground before I'll be in the perfect tree if I feel like it's off by 15 feet. So being mobile is just key.
So would you chase that observation then? You see that shooter buck and a younger buck, 50 yards out of range. Do you move for that afternoon or for the next morning?
I would I wouldn't just play the game of he goes there, I go there, he goes there. Because that doesn't generally pan out. I would try and get in the mindset of what he was doing and why he was there. If it's the beginning of November, especially, and he's I'm just pumped he's in the area. I mean, that's half the battle. I mean, you gotta count your blessings when you have a big deer, because that's the hardest thing about killing big deer is having a big deer to hunt. So it's like every time I'm on one, I'm like, I'm so lucky. This is gonna be the last one I hunt. Because it is. It's like so.
Enjoy it.
It's just so it's like it's just surreal. So, I wouldn't chase him just to chase him. I would try and figure out why he's there. If it's November, I would definitely not be chasing him unless there was a specific strategic reason to be chasing him, because, the next day he's bound to be somewhere else. I mean, I'd rather sit for 5 days in a row and not see him in a spot that I know he has to eventually go. I don't even care if he's a mile away. Eventually he's going to be there, and I'm going to use probability to kill him. When you go bouncing around and you start hunting multiple deer, I'm going to go hunt this deer tonight, I'm going to go to this farm, hunt this deer tonight, that just kills your odds. When I get on deer, I focus on that deer, and I don't go and start hunting other deer. Odds and probability will always work in your favor.
Makes sense. Certainly has seemed to work pretty well for you based on that wall in your house, or wherever that is, your barn. I've seen this picture of the beautiful high vaulted ceilings, the wood paneling, and a whole slew of big racks up there. So something's working.
Yeah, and it's still a struggle. I tell people that everything works. All the strategies work. They just don't work all the time. Yeah. Everything works. There is no right or wrong in deer hunting. All there is probability and strategy and numbers and stacking odds.
Yep. Figuring out what works in your circumstances and for your goals and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, Bobby, you made it through. You survived the What Would You Do gauntlet, but there's one last quick phase here. There's a set of rapid fire questions that I got to run you through to try to close this sucker out. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quick question, and you can only answer with one word answer. Okay. It's going to be yes or no, or this or that. Okay. No explanation allowed. All right. Here we go. Would you take a 50-yard shot at a whitetail with your bow? Yes or no?
In my younger years.
If you could only have one of these tools to use for all your hunts for the rest of your life, you can only pick one. Would you take a set of rattling antlers or a grunt tube?
Grunt tube.
Expandable or fixed blade broadheads?
Expandable, no doubt.
Should you stop a buck with some kind of sound before shooting if he's walking?
Situational.
If you could only pick one food plot crop to use for all your food plots the rest of the time, only one seed type, what would you pick?
Corn.
Which state has better hunters? North Carolina, New York, or Illinois?
They're all different.
True. And here's your last one. This one you can expand on just a little bit. Let's say that I rule the world and I have control over your hunting rights and privileges. And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to take away your hunting license for the rest of your life if you cannot kill a mature buck this year. So you got to kill a mature buck this year in order to preserve your hunting rights for the rest of your life. But here's the trick. I'm only giving you 1 day to get that mature buck killed. So all I need you to do is tell me what date on the calendar you're going to pick this year to kill your mature buck, and then paint me a picture of the stand site you would pick for that day that you think would give you the absolute best chance to kill a mature buck on that date to save the rest of your hunts for the rest of your life.
Well, if I could pick the high pressure day leading up to the full moon, it was the 25th of October. That's the day, hands down, I would pick 100%. I would hunt the scrape on the food source that the big deer has been going to, hands down. If I had to pick a random date, I would pick November 11th if I just had to pick a random day.
Going for that best chance to catch a cruiser. Kind of
just because it's, yeah. Now,
all right.
A mature deer, the most mature deer in the woods, and I'll go on a little rabbit hole here. My theory and philosophy is that you have a bell curve of does that come in, and it peaks out around November 14th or whatever in Illinois. The most mature dominant deer in the woods, he's got to search for it when the bell curve is down here. And then when he loses her and gets another one, there's more options and more options. So he can be harder to kill in the time that's the best for a big buck in general. And then the post-lockdown cruise phase, like November 6th, 17th, 18th, 19th, I think can be the best time in the actual doe-seeking rut phase to kill the biggest deer in the woods, November 17th to the 20th.
Well, I like your plan, Bobby. I think you'd get it done. I feel confident that you'd be able to keep on hunting. You'd get your buck and you'd keep your hunting rights.
And then there's early muzzleloader in Kansas, which is probably the most deadly thing in the country, and or late season in Iowa, that you can bow hunt on the late muzzleloader tag, and that is also just insanely deadly. So there's just so much fun to have out there. It's like,
it sure is. Yeah, your Kansas ranch, I've seen the video of that place that you guys are working on. That looks like an insane place for that early Kansas muzzleloader someday.
Yeah. So I'm actually getting married on I think opening day of Kansas early muzzleloader. So I will not be out there.
Oof.
So
well, congrats on the marriage. Sorry about the bad luck with the timing.
It's all good. So worth it.
You passed the test swimmingly, Bobby. So congrats on that. And you want to give folks a real quick rundown of where they can learn about your guys' properties, where they can see your videos, all that kind of stuff?
Yep. So we don't do a whole ton of things on Instagram and Facebook daily and stuff, but we have like a really good long format YouTube series where we document these farms as we develop them and stuff. So YouTube is a great place. We do have Facebook too. And then we have a website, that, we sell box blinds. We do consulting on helping people set their farms up. We have a big logging division. And all that information's on our website. We've got lots of farms for sale on there. Good luck.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, Thank you, Bobby, for doing this. Really enjoyed it, and keep up the work with the videos. I really enjoy them. The in-depth breakdowns, the farms and everything is very, it's entertaining, and that's very informational too. Yeah, so for a whitetail nerd, it's some of the best.
We try and do, there's no one size fits all, like to farms, it's like, I try and keep it interesting and situational, and like just always doing something outside the box and trying things. And there's, like I said, there's no right and wrong answers.
Yep. It's good stuff. All right, Bobby. Well, thanks for this. Good luck this season, and looking forward to keeping up on how it all goes.
All right, man. Thanks. You too.
All right, and that is a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you being a part of this community and this podcast. Stuff's only going up from here, guys. The ramp up into the season is coming in hot and heavy. I'm stoked for it. We've got 4 more episodes of this What Would You Do series with some great hunters lined up. So we're going to get some really good insights here over the month of August. And then when we kick off the season in September for a lot of us, it's just going to be more and more of these deep dives into strategy with some of the best hunters in the world, breaking down how they do what they do and what we can learn from it. I am excited. Hope you are too. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.